Stars are a pervasive form of power in the lands between. They comprise a big part of Ranni's ending, they connect sorcerers to magical power, they are likely where most outer gods reside, and they are the source of quite a few of the game's bosses. We saw one star-sent alien in my discussion of the Elden Beast, and today I want to look at its connection to another creature of the stars, the equally mysterious Astel, Naturalborn of the Void. We previously learned that the Elden Beast is a being sent to the lands between by the Greater Will. It came on a golden star. It was set up as a defense for the Elden Ring to ensure that it operated according to the Greater Will's desires. With that foundation, we can turn our attention to Astel to cross-reference for any connection. And as we delve into this new lore, feel free to subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with all of my lore and Elden Ring content. As for any notable boss, a great starting point to look at is its remembrance. The remembrance of the Naturalborn tells us that Astel is a malformed star born in the flightless void far away, once destroyed an eternal city and took away their sky, a falling star of ill omen. More than a whole video could be dedicated to deciphering this and the rest of Astel's story. So, for the purposes of this video, I will be taking the lead from vLimit's insightful account. I highly recommend you check out his video on Astel. So, because Astel destroyed an eternal city, it could be assumed that they were on the side of the Greater Will and Elden Beast, perhaps just another star sent to enforce the Greater Will's plans. After all, the Nox, which inhabit the Eternal Cities, had in the past invoked the ire of the Greater Will and were banished deep underground. With the inhabitants of the Eternal Cities being enemies of the Greater Will, enemies who went so far as to fashion the Fingerslayer blade to kill its vassal Two Fingers, it is easy to think that Astel would be on the Greater Will's side by being seen as an enemy of the Nox. But vLimit illustrates that this might not be the case. If we look at the description of Astel's remembrance closely, we will see that the two named Eternal Cities, Nokron and Noxtella, don't quite fit the description of having been destroyed and robbed of their sky. Both of the cities have many non-destroyed architecture as well as star-filled skies. The skies are noted to be false, but they're still there. In contrast, there is one more Eternal City, which is more properly destroyed and devoid of sky. In the Deeproot depths, there is a grace that reveals the area to be that of a forgotten, nameless Eternal City. Now, we only have reference of the Greater Will banishing the Nox, not destroying them or their cities. This led vLimit to posit that Astel might have been created or harnessed by the Nox as a means of attack against the Greater Will, only to have their creature turn against them, level their city, and steal their sky. This would track with the fact that despite there being two Astel, the Naturalborn of the Void at the end of Ranni's quest, and the Stars of Darkness in the consecrated snowfield, only one of them has a night sky in their boss fight arena. The Naturalborn has a star-filled night sky just like those of the Eternal Cities, whereas the Stars of Darkness introduces no unique atmosphere or sky. If only one sky were stolen, as it seems to be the case since only one Eternal City is missing a sky, then we would only expect to see one sky-bearing Astel. If the Greater Will had sicked Astel onto the Nox and Eternal Cities, I would think that multiple Astel would mean multiple cities destroyed and multiple skies taken. But that doesn't happen. If instead the Astel were some product of a Noxian plan, then the single city destruction could make sense if the Nox were only attempting that plan in one city. We know from their other creations, such as the Mimic Tears and the Fingerslayer blade, that the Nox were open to trying anything and everything in their aims of fighting back against the Greater Will, so making a few Astel could seem plausible. So maybe the Astel are not an arm of the Greater Will, and instead a creation of the Nox. If this is the case, how did the Nox bring them about? The Greater Will could have just sent them in from space like it does the Elden Beast, at least that's all the description we get. The Nox, not being outer gods, likely would have needed some specific method to do this. We might be able to learn of these means by looking at what seems to be another form of Astel, that is, the Falling Star Beasts. The Falling Star Beasts are found in meteor impacts throughout the lands between. Because of their similar pincers, gravity magic, a similar looking growth in the case of the full-grown Falling Star Beast, and the fact that the Naturalborn's remembrance explicitly calls Astel a falling star, the connections between these two kinds of beings are undeniable. Astel are some derivative offshoot evolution or some other form of the Falling Star Beasts. vLimit thinks that the Nox formed Astel out of the Falling Star Beasts, giving them their human-like influence. the arms and skull. And I think this, or something like it, is plausible. Looking at the more prominent of the two Astel's epithet, a naturalborn, or a natural child, is a euphemism for an illegitimate child, or a bastard. The remembrance can also be formed into a weapon called the Bastard's Stars, which reads, "Formed of the same many-colored star debris that comprised the form of the naturalborn of the void." These themes speak to the fact that Astel's birth or creation was in some way unnatural or improper. Astel was born in the wrong way, though in what manner this birth is wrong is hard to say for certain. A right birth is likely what the falling star beasts count as. So the most plausible explanation to me would be that the Nox somehow interfered with some of the falling star beasts, likely when they were still stars in space or first coming upon the lands between. Somehow the Nox influenced or corrupted the falling stars they had influence over and turned them into what became Astel. As V-Limit points out, if the Nox wanted something to contend with the Greater Will and its star of the Elden Beast, what better than another star? And if we look at the two fights, we come to see a few threads of connection, despite their apparent dissimilarities. Both of the fights take place in large circular arenas. Both of the bosses have some flavor of snake or serpentine bodies and motion. While many of their attacks are different, they both have a painful grab and a star-like nebula attack where they emit a cluster of stars which then explode on a delay. The clusters do appear a bit different, in line with the different themes of each boss. Astel's is more purple and silver, the Elden Beast's is more red and gold. The silver of the Nox against the gold of the Order. Again, taking an idea from V-Limit, seriously, go watch his video. The experience one goes through in each fight also shares similarities. As the bosses bear a similar overall size and rough shape, attacking each one ends up following like strategies. The heads are focal points to target, but often end up moving around enough to justify going for appendages or body shots. Dodging grabs and front-facing arm attacks is contrasted with avoiding projectiles raining down from the heavens in both fights. One could maybe say that the similar fight experience and strategy is due to the bosses being a similar type in size and leave it alone there, kind of as a artifact of FromSoft just making similar kinds of big bosses. But with the lore that FromSoft has written in the game that connects these two, a deeper connection and rationale for the similar fights is pretty hard to argue with on a story perspective. As rival sources of star power, Astel and the Elden Beast seem well matched, something like two sides of a coin. Though we do see more than one Astel, and there is a potential for even more since there are so many falling star beasts, whereas the Elden Beast seems more one of a kind. And as the singular envoy of the Greater Will, in addition to being the final boss, it does give it a bit more grandeur and sense of power and scale. Maybe the Greater Will has many more beasts at its disposal, like the many seeming Erdtrees we see in the Final Fights arena, but in-game we only see and have evidence for the one. If we really want to speculate though, the uniqueness of Astel might be able to be defended in some way if we take a step back and remember that Elden Ring is a game filled to the brim with repurposed enemy and boss assets. For example, there is technically a lore justification for them being different, but in practicality there are two Godric's in the game. One got renamed to Godfroy and was given just a teensy bit of story in the lore to say they're different, but in my opinion the lore here seems very derivative or after the fact of the reusing of a story boss in an Evergaol. It very well could have been the case that Astel was a one-of-the-kind who then got the same treatment, with a sentence or two changed in the lore to demarcate the Naturalborn from the Stars of Darkness, and justify the reused gameplay asset. We might be able to find justification for this, seeing as Astel was one of the most unique experiences in the game at the culmination of Ranni's questline, only to lose its one-of-a-kind status to a random boss repeat at the end of an ice tunnel in a secondary optional area in the game. Though, to not delve too far into a critique of the game like the last video, we can't go further here without any actual evidence from the game itself, which is something I don't think we have. The Elden Beast and Astel offer a small kind of foil to one another, especially if they are, in fact, beasts of opposing sides, the Greater Will and the Nox. Unfortunately, we don't have more specific evidence to mull over to make any further clear conclusions. Again, in like manner, Astel is shrouded in questions, just as we saw with the Elden Beast. In a more dedicated exploration of Astel, and the stars, the creatures from the stars, we might find a few more answers about the nature of star creatures, and that could be a future video on the channel. But for now, we have seen the connection to the Elden Beast. Despite a wealth of differences, there are a few threads that tie together these otherworldly creatures. If you would like to join me in continuing this journey through the lore and themes of Elden Ring, feel free to subscribe to the channel or sign up to support me on Patreon, where you get early access to video scripts along with other perks, in addition to supporting the channel. I hope you have enjoyed watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.